योगेन चित्तस्य पदेन वाचां मलं शरीरस्य च वैद्यकेन योपाकरोत्तं प्रवरं मुनीनां पतञ्जलिं प्राञ्जलिरानतोऽस्मि आबाहुपुरुषाकारं शङ्खचक्रासिधारणं सहस्रशिरसं श्वेतं प्रणमामि पतञ्जलिम् गुरुर्ब्रह्मा गुरुर्विष्णु गुरुर्देवो महेश्वरः गुरुः साक्षात् परब्रह्म तस्मै श्रीगुरवे नमः हरिः ओम. So we are on Sutra 3.26, which is bhuvanajñānaṃ sūrye saṃyamāt. Now within this has a long bhashya, and like we covered last time, it refers to the esoteric geography, so to speak. And one view also of the esoteric geography is that yogis often also find the regions within the body as dhyana sthana. So as a result of the dhyana, or also sometimes referred to as for purposes of meditation, it is also identified within the embodiment. And of course, the various texts like the Puranas locate these regions within the creation at different planes or different lokas, so to speak. Also, like we mentioned last time, whenever a certain locus for the saṃyama is given in the Vibhuti Pada, that context is used to instruct us about several of the allied fields of Yoga Shastra, and in general give us some information, give us some context to the various other topics that may not directly fall under yoga itself. And here in bhuvanajñānaṃ sūrye saṃyamāt, we are learning about what we refer to as esoteric geography, the various lokas, the various parvatas, the mountains, lokas, the worlds, and their inhabitants, the celestial deities, etc., etc. So in the previous session, we ended with the sentence which says, Andam cha pradhanasya anuhu avayavaha yathakashe khadyotaha iti. So the huge creation was described with several lokas, bhuloka, suvarloka, etc., etc. Now all of this is within what is in English it is referred to as the cosmic egg. So this andam, in comparison to pradhana or the prakriti as a whole, it is said this is anu avayavaha, this is the infinitesimal part. So then this opened our eyes to how large the pradhana and the creation as a whole is. And here another analogy was given, yathakashe khadyotaha iti. So if in the skies, the vast skies, a small sparkle of light, a small firefly, how it will be seen in proportion to the overall dimension, so is this andam in proportion to the pradhana, it is said. Now we continue. Vyasa continues with a description of patala. Now with patala, as we mentioned, that refers to the nether world, the nether regions. So we'll now learn about that. So Vyasa says, Tatra patale jaladau parvateshu eteshu devanikayaha asuragandharva kinnara kimpurusha yaksharakshasa bhutapreta pishacha apasmaraka apsaro brahmarakshasa kushmanda vinayakaha prativasanti. So in fact, this is not only about Patala, but about Patala, Jaladhi, so the oceans, Parvata, the mountains, etc. There are various kinds of beings. So now we learn about the inhabitants. Now for these beings, there are several names that have been given. So the Deva Nikaya refers to the deities, the superhuman beings. So Deva Gana, Deva Nikaya, Deva Samuha, etc. Then there are several other names which people familiar with the Indian mythology maybe can recognize. We won't go into too much detail, but Asura, they are sort of the demons, so to speak. Gandharvas, celestial beings, artists, musicians. And Kinnara, Kimpurusha, Yaksha, Rakshasa, Bhuta, Preta, Pishacha, etc. Now, there are subtle distinctions among all these types of beings that we won't go into, but the idea is among the godly beings and the demonic beings and celestial beings that are of a different nature, neither godly nor demonic. Some are attached to music and arts, some are damsels, celestial damsels, etc. So here that whole list is given. So Bhuta, Preta, Pishacha, Apasmara, Apsara, Brahma Rakshasa, etc. etc. So they all live in these various regions. So Prativasanti. Sarveshu Dvipeshu Punyatmanah Devamanushyaha. So this was about Patala, Jalati and the Parvata, which is the nether regions, the oceans and the mountains. Now what about the Dvipas? So if you remember, the earth or the place where we stay, where we live is known as Jambu Dvipa. So there are several Dvipas that we looked at. So several islands surrounded by oceans containing different kinds of fluids, which we have also already seen. So here, who reside there? Punyatmanah Devamanushyaha. Here there are beings who have done meritorious deeds, and they have been described as Devamanushyaha. So the Devas, the Manushas, so the Manushya means human beings, Devas are higher celestial deities, all live in the Dvipas. Sumerus Trideva Dashanam Udyana Bhumihi. So now there are further gardens. Udyana Bhumi refers to gardens. So Sumeruhu Tridashanam. So Tridasha means the Devatas, the deities. So Sumeruhu, it is the gardens. Sumeru Tridashana Udyana Bhumihi. Udyana means gardens. Now what about that? Tatra Mishravanam, Nandanam, Chaitraratham, Sumanasam, iti Udyanani. So there are these different gardens that have been named. Mishravanam, Nandanam, etc. Then Sudharma Deva Sabha. So there is a Deva Sabha. So like an assembly hall, an assembly place, which is known as Sudharma. So these names are significant in the Indian culture. For example, there is a famous Indian Sanskrit magazine called Sudharma. So they have pervaded the Indian culture, and these are the names. So Sudharma Deva Sabha. Sudarshanam Puram. So the city, the Nagara, is known as Sudarshanam. Vaijayantaha Prasadaha. So Prasada means mansion or palace. So there is a palace or mansion called Vaijayanta, etc. Then Graha Nakshatra Tarakastu Dhruve Nibaddha Vayu Vikshepa Niyamena Upalakshita Pracharaha Sumeroho Upari Upari Sannivishta Viparivartante. Now the description is going out of the Bhuloka to the Antariksha, the skies. So it says Graha Nakshatra Tarakastu. So the various planets and the stars, etc. It says they are tied to the Dhruva Nakshatra. So in some sense, they have a link to the Dhruva Nakshatra, which has a constant place in the skies, which we refer to as the pole star. So that is the Dhruva Nakshatra. And then Vayu Vikshepa Niyamena. So through it is their movement is described as a result of the Vayu Vyapara. So, because of the Vayus, they are moving in a certain regularity. So, it is called Vayu Vikshepan Niyamena. Niyama means there is a certain regularity. Upalakshita Pracharaha. So, by their Upalakshita, they are identified by the Vayu Nakshatra Niyama, the regularity coming from the movement of the Vayu as it is described here. And that is how they are said to move. So, how do they move? Sumeroho upari upari sannivishtaha viparivartante. So, they revolve, they rotate in a certain way in the skies above the Sumeru mountains. So, above the Sumeru is said to be the Dhruva, and around that, these are rotating. Now, beyond this, there is a description of the various beings in the various lokas beyond this Antariksha Loka that we just looked at. So, Mahendra Nivasinaha Shadeva Nikayaha. So, in the Mahendra Loka, which we had already seen, who lives there? Who are the inhabitants? So, in the Swarga Lokas, we begin, and there are multiple levels as we have seen, even within this. There was the Mahendra Loka, then there was the Prajapati Loka, etc. So, we will see those. So, in the Loka of Indra, the Mahendra Loka, there are 6 types of groups of Devatas, deities. Tridashaha, Agnishvataha. So, Tridashaha, Agnishvataha, Yamyaha, Tushitaha, Aparinirmita Vashavartinaha, Parinirmita Vashavartinascheti. So these are the 6. So all these are the names. So Tridasha often is used as a synonym for the Devas, but here we learn that it is a specific a category of the celestial beings. So one is called Tridasha, one is called Agnishwataha, one is called the Yamya, then the Tushita, then the Aparinirmita Vashavartinaha and the Parinirmita Vashavartinaha. So they are the 6 names. Now Vyasa doesn't go into too much detail on this, but we can then explore the Puranas elsewhere to find out more about this. Te sarve sankalpa siddha animadyaishwaryopapannaha kalpayushaha vrindarakaha kamabhoginaha aupapadika dehaha uttamanukulabhirapsarobhihi krutaparivaraha. Now, further they are described. So all of them, all these 6 types, all these 6 categories, they are sankalpa siddhaha, means their sankalpas or any of their will is auto-established. So whatever they will comes true. Then they have the Ashta Siddhis, Anima, Lagima, etc. All the 8 Siddhis they have. Kalpayushaha, they have the lifetime of a Kalpa. So this also we have discussed earlier. So for example, we have said currently the Kalpa going on, the Shvetavaraha Kalpa. Kalpa is a time period, and we have seen the various Manvantaras and the different epochs in the Indian Puranic terminology. So their lifetime is said to be as much as 1 Kalpa. Then Vrindarakaha means worship worthy, Pujya, Pujaniya. And Kamabhoginaha, so they live with certain desires, and for which they have earned the merit to enjoy these desires, which they do. Aupacharika dehaha, so they have this divine body, the Divya Sharira, which they can sort of build their own body or wear their own body, so to speak, on their own. So they have the Divya Sharira. And then they have formed families with the Uttamanukulabhi Apsarobhi, with the celestial damsels. They have built their own families. Apsarobhi Kritaparivaraha. So this is a description of all the celestial deities that live in the Mahendra Loka. Now we continue. Mahati Loke. So we have seen Mahaha, the Mahat, as the name of the Loka. So in that Loka, in that world, Mahati Loke, Prajapatye. So we have also seen that the Mahar Loka is one of the Prajapati. So Mahati Loke, Prajapatye, Panchavido Devanikāyaha. So here there are 5 categories of divinities, celestial beings. And the names are mentioned. Kumudaha, Rubhavaha, Pratardhanaha, Anjanabhaha, and Prachitabha. So these are the 5 names of the 5 types of deities. Ete Mahabhutavashinaha, Dhyanaharaha, Kalpasahasrayushaha. So now they are even higher beings. All the Mahabhutas, the Pancha Mahabhutas, which we in English we say earth, water, fire, air, and ether, it is said, as Prithvi, Aptej, Vayu, Akasha, they have that in their control. So, which means anything that they would want to be created out of the Mahabhutas, they can create by their will alone. So, Mahabhuta Vashinaha. Dhyanaharaha. Dhyana aharaha refers to that their food, so to speak, or they subsist on dhyana alone. They don't need food, water, they don't suffer hunger. So it is dhyana, which is where they find their subsistence. So dhyana haraha. Kalpa sahasrayushaha. So if the beings in the Mahendra Loka had a lifetime of 1 kalpa, here in the Mahar Loka, the Prajapati Loka, they have a lifetime of 1000 kalpas. So that is known as Kalpa Sahasrayushaha. So this is much higher deities with control of Mahabhutas who subsist on Dhyana alone and can live for 1000 kalpas. Now, Vyasa goes further. He says, Pratame Brahmano Janaloke. Now there are, in the Brahma Loka also, we have seen that there after Mahaha there is Janaha, Tapaha and Satyam. So we are referring to the first of those. So Pratame Brahmano Janaloke Chaturvidho Devanikāyaha. So 4 categories here. What are the 4 in the Janaloka? So we have seen Mahaha, now we are looking at Janaha. So that is Brahma Purohitaha, Brahma Kaikaha, then Brahma Mahakaikaha, and Ajaramaraha. So we get a clue from these names also. So Brahma Purohita means, Purohita is often referred to like the priest, so to speak. Brahma Kaika, Kaya means, Kayaha means body. Mahakaikaha and Ajaramara. Jara means old age, Marana means death. So that is Ajaramaraha. So these are the 4 categories. Now about them. Ete Bhutendriya Vashinaha Dvigana Dviganottarayushaha. So now they have the Bhuta and the Indriyas in their control. And each of those have twice the life of the previous category. So for example, we had seen in the Mahendra Loka there are 1000 kalpas. So in the Jana Loka, the first category, Brahma Purohita, will have 2000 kalpa. Brahma Kaika will have 4000 kalpa. Brahma Mahakaika will have 8000. Ajaramara will have 16,000 kalpas. So this is the extent of their lifetimes. And their Siddhi is also higher. Their Vibhuti is also higher. Because now they have Bhutendriya Vashinaha. Now Vyasa continues. He goes beyond the Jana Loka to Tapa Loka. Dvitiye Tapasi Loke Trivido Devana Nikayaha. So there are now 3 categories in the Tapa Loka. They are Abhaswaraha, Mahabhaswaraha, Satya Mahabhaswaraha. So three categories. Ete bhutendriya prakriti vashinaha. So not only bhutendriyas, they have the bhutas, the bhuta, the elements, the indriyas, as well as the prakriti in their control. Then Riguna Dvigunottarayushaha. So they go further. If the last one ended at 16,000 kalpas, this will go to 32, 64, 128, and so on. Sarve dhyanaharaha urdhvaretasah urdhvam apratihata jnanaha adarabhumishu anavrata jnana vishayaha. So there is greater capabilities. They all subsist on dhyana. So they are also dhyanaharaha. Further, they have been described as urdhvaretasaha. Urdhvaretasaha means they have the generative organ in their control completely. Then urdhvam apratihata jnanaha. There the extent of the jnana that they have is not broken anywhere. Okay, so the jnana vishaya extends above them to the higher lokas without being obstructed. And adara bhumishu anavrata jnana vishayaha. So their jnana reaches the entire everything that is there in the bhumis below them. So that is the extent of their jnanam. So this is how these celestial beings. So as you see in the Indian system, when we say God or deities or celestial beings, there is a very detailed categorization of how that is being done and who are the various types of devatas, etc. So now, tritiye brahmanaha satyaloke chatvaro devanikayaha. Now the highest of the brahmalokas, which is the satya. Here also there are four categories. They are achyutaha, shuddha nivasaha, satyabhaha, and sanya sangyanascheti. So there are four: achyuta, shuddha nivasa, satyabha, and sanya sangyana. So what about them? Akruta bhuvanajñānaṃ, swapratishtha, upari sthitaha, pradhanavashinaha, yavat sargayushaha. So now we look at what is their powers or their greatness. So akruta bhuvanajñānaṃ. So they don't need any residing place. They don't need to build a house, etc. They don't need what we refer to as shelter. So they don't build that, they don't have that. Swapratishtha. Why? Because they are established in their own self. So that is swapratishtha. So here, while we are learning this description, we also should understand the significance of what is being said and which aspect or which quality is considered how much higher than the lower quality. Upari sthitaha. Each of these categories is a level above the previous one. So that is referred to as upari sthitaha. And pradhanavashinaha. So even the subtle form of Prakriti before its evolution, which then encompasses all the states of evolution, they have even that under control. So they have the Prakriti Jaya or the Pradhana Jaya. So it is said Pradhanavashinaha. And how much is their lifetime? Sargayushaha. So entire creation, which is made up of all these kalpas, manvantaras, etc., the entire cycle of creation up to Mahapralaya, where the entire creation is pulled back into Pradhana state and into what we refer to as Brahman. So that is the extent of their lifetime. Now within this also there is a categorization. Okay. So in this categorization within them, it says Tatra Achyutaha Savitarka Dhyana Sukhaha. So all of them are Dhyana Aharaha. They subsist on Dhyanam. But then here different levels of Dhyanam has been described. So the Achyutas, first category, they are Savitarka Dhyana Sukha. So we have seen this. Savitarka, Savichara, etc. In the first chapter, we have seen it in high detail, so you can refer back to that. So the Achyutas are Savitarka Dhyana Sukhaha. So they are absorbed, they are immersed in the Savitarka Dhyana, which, as you remember, it is the Vitarka refers to the gross Vishayas, and the Vichara refers to the subtle Vishayas, and there is further level of detail and depth in understanding which is covered in the first chapter. Shuddha Nivasaha Savichara Dhyana Sukhaha. So, among the Samprajñāta Samadhi that we had seen, so here we see that different celestial deities, even within them, the highest of the highest, there is a categorization depending on the type of the Samprajñāta Samadhi that they are involved in. Satyabhaha Anandamatra Dhyana Sukhaha. So the Anandamatra that we had seen. And Sanyasanginischa Asmitamatra Dhyana Sukhaha. So we see this categorization of the different levels that we had seen in the context of Samprajñāta Samadhi that is coming back here in terms of the categorization of the celestial beings, and the different Samprajñāta Samadhi puts that degree of or that particular category of celestial being one level higher, and all of these are the highest of the highest in the celestial beings. So that also tells us that the yogic powers, the yogic siddhis that we read casually, that's been given such a high status in the Puranic lore and in the Indian description of the celestial deities. Now further, tepi trailokya madhye pratitishtanti. So even these highest beings that are there for the entire sarga, the entire period of creation, even these, where do they reside? In the Trailokya. Now Trailokya refers to this whole categories of lokas. So they are still within this sphere of creation. They are still within this Brahmandam, so to speak. So they are within this Brahmandam, even the ones that are the highest of the highest. Te ete saptalokaha sarva eva brahmalokaha. So all of these are brahmalokas, essentially, it says. So all these saptalokas that we have been seeing, they are all still brahmalokas. Now, videha prakritilayastu moksha pade vartante. Now, this we have seen, bhava pratyaya videha prakritilayanam. This we saw in the first chapter, which at that point was mysterious. It seemed a bit out of place, where it said yogi had a certain way, and the bhava pratyaya who have that capability by birth, they are the videhas and the prakritilayas. Now we understand that better, because here it says videha prakritilayastu. So these celestial beings, they are not in the Trailokya, they are not in the Brahmandam, they are beyond, their residing places beyond Brahmandam. So moksha pade vartante. So that is referred to as moksha pada, which is outside of the creation. So that is the special place. So that special place in terms of where they reside, where their adhisthana is said to be, and also in terms of them being beyond these four states of Samprajñāta Samadhi, and they meet the Asamprajñāta Samadhi level, because the Prakriti Laya has happened. The Chitta has already dissolved into the Pradhana Prakriti. So there are different dimensions from which this has to be understood. So the Videha Prakriti Layas, Moksha Pade Vartante. So they are Brahmanda Bahihi. They are outside of the Trailokya. They are outside of the Brahmanda. Na Loka Madhye Nyastaha iti. So they are not embedded. They are not part of the worlds or the lokas. So here we read here about the fascinating categorization of the so-called celestial beings, and we say, okay, there are so many categories, and then their residing place, their attributes, their siddhis, their qualities, and that correlation with the samadhi, the samprajnata samadhi, the asamprajnata samadhi that we read about in a very theoretical way in the first chapter sort of falls in place in this what is referred to as mythology or the Puranic lore and how it all fits in together. Now, etat yoginam sakshat kartavyam सूर्यद्वारे संयमं कृत्वा ततो अन्यत्रापि एवं तावत् अभ्यसेत् यावत् इदं सर्वं दृष्टम् इति. So Vyasa finally concludes by saying, through Suryadvara Sanyama, and this we discussed in the beginning of this sutra, where the sutra says Surya Sanyama, Vyasa has referred to as Suryadvara Sanyama, which some of the commentators have referred to as the Sushumna Nadi, it's Brahmadvara, etc. So there is a Surya in the sky, and then the Surya Nadi, the Sushumna, etc. within the embodiment. So the commentators have taken both the meanings, and different commentators have taken different meanings. But all of this we have to see in the context of how, in the yogi's outlook, whatever is in the universe is also identified within. So that is another point to be understood when we read Vyasa saying Surya Dware Sanyamam Krutva. Then yogis have to, what do they have to do? Sakshat Kartavyam. So they have to make it directly perceive it. Sakshat Kartavyam means when you see something, it is directly seen. So in the Chitta, there is a direct cognition of that object. Similarly, through the pratyaksha that can arise from the yogic process, this has to be directly realized, directly perceived by the yogis. And Surya Dware Sanyamam Krutva, says Vyasa. Then he says, Tataha Anyatrapi, elsewhere as well. So he opens up, he widens it. He says, Anyatrapi evam tavat abhyasayet. So if Surya Dwara is interpreted as a specific region within the embodiment, he says elsewhere as well, you have to do this kind of Sanyamam until when? Yavat idam sarvam drashtam iti. Until all of this is directly perceived and realized. So Vyasa opens the locus of Sanyama from the specific point which has been referred to as Surya and the Surya Dwara to the entire esoteric embodiment within, to say that this has to be done, the Sanyama has to be practiced, abhyasayat, which means to be done over and over and over. Pauna paunyena karane is abhyasaha, to be done over and over again. Until when? Until all of this gets directly perceived. So with this ends the bhashya on this particular sutra.
So Vyasa is commenting on very fascinating sutra, which is describing what is referred to as Trilokyam. That is terrestrial plane, infernal plane, and celestial plane. And there are various layers in all these planes. Like the netherly world has saptapatalas, and we named them in the earlier session, such as Atala, Vitala, Susala, Talatala, Rasatala, Patala, Mahapatala. So they are lower planes. There are 7 lower planes, and there are 7 higher planes above, starting from Bhuloka, Bhuvarloka, Suvarloka, the Sapta Vargalokas. Bhuvu, Bhuva, Swaha, Maha, Janaha, Tapaha, Satyam. So, this is mapping of the whole universe. And that is being described here. Now, we, in our times, try to hold something as aliens who are not from our plane, our earth, but outside the earth. Some being is referred to as alien. While in Vedic parampara, in Vedic tradition, they did not have this concept that all those are non-terrestrial or aliens. There is no need to have such position that only terrestrials are allies and extraterrestrial are alien. There is no basis for which to say that it is like that. So now, these are being described in details. So he begins by explaining Patala Loka. And you heard the commentary where various kinds of beings they reside. Patala means here he also includes Jaladhau and Parvata. Because there is no human inhabitation on mountain peaks of Himalayas. There is no human inhabitation in the depths of ocean. The human inhabitation is only on the land mass surface of the earth, the land surface of the earth, and there too not everywhere. We are not in forests, in deep woods and deep forests. Today we have lost all these forests. But there is a time when there were forests, etc. And we also today accept some beings inhabiting in those forests, and they are referred to as aboriginals. And we think we are different than them. So he begins describing these beings, which are named as, they can be Devanikaya, they can be of the class of deities, that is superhuman class, semi-deities, demi-deities, deities, Asura Gandharva, Kinnara. So these are all superhuman beings. And we come across mention of these people coming to our planes, human planes, and they prove that they are superhuman beings, such as Gandharva. So Asura, Gandharva, Kinnara, Kimpurusha, Yaksha, Rakshasa, Bhuta Preta Pishacha. Bhuta Preta is understood as the class of ghosts, spirits, vampires. And so also Apsaras, celestial dancers, and then Brahma Rakshasa, Kushmanda, Vinayaka, etc. So these are various classes of beings, from celestial beings to Rakshasas, Bhuta Preta, Pishachas, etc., etc. So though they all are on the planet, maybe on mountaintops or maybe in ocean depths, and can appear on the land surface also, which Puranas tell us the history, or that comes in Puranas tell us about it. So these are all beings, and these are different grades of beings. Then there is mention of Sapta Dvipas, and you heard just now, Jambu Dvipa is the island on which we are living in Bharatavarsha here, which is a kind of island because then there are oceans away from us. And they are Deva Manushyaha. So Deva Manushya means Punyatmas, exalted human beings, personification of Punya, personification of Dharma. That's how they are. Then Sumeruhu Tridashanam Udyana Bhumihi, Meru Parvata, which is sometimes referred to as a North Pole. And then there is the garden for celestial beings. Just as we have gardens in our own cities and we visit the gardens, these are gardens of celestial deities. That is what is being mentioned here. And these gardens are called Mishravanam, Nandanam, Chaiturasam, Sumarasam. The names are also significant. Of course, we will not go into the depth of the meanings of the names. Just one example I will take here, Sumanasam, Manasam, the mind. A higher grade of mind than average human plane of mind. So, the celestial deities are having purer minds than we terrestrial beings have. Then there is also Deva Sabha called Sudharma. There is a city of Sudarshanam, and there is Prasada, a palace, a mansion called Vajayanta. So these are descriptions of those some terrestrial, celestial planes. Then comes the plane of Bhuvarlokam, Grahanakshatra, the various planets and stars and nebulae, etc., celestial bodies of which we are aware today because of little orientation to astronomy, astrophysics. So, these are described. Usually, today we are only aware of those planes in terms of distances. Like Sun is 93 billion miles away, or a star might be some light years away, couple of light years away, to tens of light years away, to hundreds of light years away, to thousands of light years away. So we only know them in terms of distances. And that's all in Bhuvarloka. And the Vayu Vikshepa, the Vayu is something which is very important to a force that is to be reckoned with. Because otherwise we do not know. We know the cyclones, hurricanes, tempests, tornadoes, which happen on the planet. So we know how they are devastating they are. That's called vortex. So we know how devastating sometimes they can be, such as tornadoes and hurricanes and tempests. But they are paltry bit compared to what happens on higher planes like Graha Nakshatra Taraka. Certain things, these things happen. Hurricanes also happen. Tornado-like things happen. Tempest-like things happen in other planes beyond the earth. And just as an example, I would like to cite here that we are aware of our cyclones and these winds and hurricanes which blow in some 100 miles per hour. And they are absolutely devastating at 100 miles per hour. But we have no clue that something on Uranus, a planet, a graha, Uranus, called Varuna, the winds flow at times at the speed of 2,000 miles per hour as divulged by modern science. So you can imagine where is that 100 odd miles per hour on the planet, and where is 2,000, 3,000 miles per hour or Uranus. How devastating if we have Uranus kind of hurricane or breeze or tornado, we will be perishing. Everything will be perishing on the planet with 2,000 miles per hour. So Vayu Vikshepa, this has been also mentioned in the ancient text. That is Vayu Vikshepa on these Graha Nakshatra Tara. And that is the Antariksha Loka description. Then comes the plane of Mahendra Loka. And there the class of beings are described, which is fascinating. There are these 6 grades or categories of beings, living beings. If you recall, we had dealt with this concept that the life is everywhere. It is not only on the planet. Different kinds of lives exist in the cosmos. It's not only that our blue planet is only having life. Our blue planet has one kind of life which lives on oxygen, and exceptionally something lives on carbon dioxide. So we know what is the biological life form on the planet. But there are life forms even in the celestial planes. And here there are 6 kinds of those. Shad Deva Nikayaha. And the categories are being mentioned, Tridasha, Agnishwatha, etc. which we just now heard from Srineet. So those are not aliens. In Vedic wisdom and in Vedic tradition, they are not aliens. They are superpowers, superhuman beings. They are Devata Gana. They are shed with the Devata Gana. Devata means deities, semi-deities, demi-deities, etc. And they have glorious powers, which you heard, Sarva Sankalpa Siddhaha. That means they wish and it happens. As against, understand our conditions. We wish and exactly opposite happens, or we wish and that doesn't happen at all. If we don't wish, something will happen. But we have wished for it, it doesn't happen, it eludes us. Or opposite can happen. So this is the plight of mortals on the planet. But they are Sarva Sankalpa Siddhaha. They have Animadi Ashtamaha Siddhis at their fingertips. They have those glorious Aishwarya. And their lifespan is Kalpa Yusha. One Kalpa, which stands 4,320 millions of years. 4,320 million years is the lifespan of those beings. They live for one kalpa. Whereas we mortals at the most live for 100 years or 100 plus years. And that's a great lifespan for us. So imagine these Devaganas having lifespan of 4,320 million years. And they are described, they are puja, worship worthy, because they are celestial deities, they are gods. Kama Bhoga Priya, after all, they are in heavens. What is in heavens? Enjoyment, enjoyment, and enjoyment. Glorious enjoyment, celestial enjoyment, transcendent enjoyment, that's what we get on the planet. Divya Shariradhari, their bodies are also unique. What is the Divya Shariram? Devata Shastra describes that it is Ayonija. We are all born of parents. All the beings on the planet, biological creatures, are born out of the parents. But these beings are not born of parents. That's why it is called Divya Shariradhari, Ayonija. So also Divya Ghataka, the constituents of their body is also unique, because they are going to live for 4,000 odd millions of years. Our body cannot last for more than 100 years or 100 plus years. That's all is the matter of the body that can put up with. But these bodies put up with some 4,320 million years. So you can imagine the body matter, Divya Ghataka. They are made of a Divya Ghataka, that is Divya Shariradhari. That's how it is described. They are always surrounded by celestial damsels, and they are all the time in sports, enjoyment, and that's why we have this feeling that the gods, I mean, they have enjoyment infinite. They all the time enjoy. There is never ever a time that they are not enjoying. That is the Devatva. So this we have idea about Devas who are always in delights and happiness and joy and gratifications, enjoyments. So this has been mentioned here. Then he mentions Mahorloka. So Bhuva, Bhuva, Swaha mentioned now. Suvarloka, Swargaloka means celestial plane of gods. Now Maholoka, Mahati Prajapatye, that is of Prajapati, that is of the Brahma, the creator deity. There are 5 kinds of life forms. Devanikaya, Kumuda, and Rubhava, Pratardana, Anjanabha, Prachitava. So they are named in our Shastras. And their specialities are mentioned. They are all Mahabhuta Vashinaha. All the Mahabhutas which are under which we are controlled of, we are controlled by elements, but they are controlling the elements. So you can understand the Devatvam, the godness, godliness, deityship, because the Mahabhutas are under their control. And their food is Samadhi and Dhyana. We need to have a dining table and we need to have eatables around us, comprising of, as far as nutrition is concerned, A to Z vitamins, minerals, proteins, calciums, etc., etc. So we know what is our ahara. Their ahara is only dhyana. And their lifespan is Kalpa Sahastra, 1,000 kalpas. So we saw one kalpa means 4,320 years of day and 4,320 years of night. That is 8,640 billion years is the kalpa. Now they are one sahastra kalpa into 1,000 is their lifespan. See the enormity of their lifespan. You can understand what must be their bodies, which can last for such a long duration, nearly 10,000 billion years. That's the lifespan of the sun. And dhyana provides them every kind of nourishment that their bodies need. Then comes to the Brahma Loka, first of it, Jana Loka, Chaturveda Devanikayaha, 4 categories of Devatas. Brahma Purohita, Brahma Kayika, Brahma Mahakayika, Amara. And you heard about these names just now. So, they are slowly, progressively evolved beings on higher planes. They are Bhutendriya Vashina. Bhutendriya Vashina, that means Bhutendriyas are there under their control, while our condition miserable is that we are under control of elements and our senses. We are slaves of elements, we are slaves of senses. Their elements and senses are there under their control, that means they are masters of it. And their lifespan is Divinottaraha. So progressively these 4 classes of devatas, their lifespan will be multiplying twice. That is, to put in figures, the first one would be having lifespan of 2,000 kalpas. The next one would be having 4,000, then the next one would be having 8,000, and the next one would be having 16,000 kalpa. That would be the lifespan. Then the second plane there is Tapasi Loka, Tapo Loka. And there are 3 kinds of deities, classes. The 3 classes are mentioned as Abhasvara, Mahabhasvara, Satyabhasvara. So these are their gradations and these are their nomenclatures which get mentioned in our Puranas and in our esoteric geography of entire universe. So they are masters of Bhuta Indriya Prakriti as well. To see the progression, Bhuta Vasha, then Bhutendriya Vasha, and now Bhuta Indriya Prakriti Vasha. And their food is also Dhyana. All that they need, they get it from Dhyana. Unlike our condition, all that we need, we try to procure it by money. Although some certain things are not procured by money, most of the things we try to procure by money. And their money, their currency is Dhyana. And they have knowledge of all the other lokas. Low-lying planes are all matter of their knowledge. Then finally the Satya Loka is described, and then there the beings Chaturvidha, 4 categories of beings. They are mentioned. They do not need any house. Their own embodiment is their house. They live within themselves. And their lifespan is said to be Saraganta. So which is estimated to be 12,900,000 plus kalpas. And there, the classes, the Achyuta. It is Savitarka Sukha. It is experiencing the Vitarkanugata Sukha. Shuddha Nivasas are in Vicharanugata Sukha. Satyabha are in Ananda Samadhi Sukha. And Sagnya, they are in Asmita Samadhi Sukham. So see the progressive Sukham. So they get those transcendent joys and happinesses. They cannot be called as happinesses because we really cannot imagine that degree of their happiness. And sometimes they are considered Manusha Sukham, Manushananda is what is our Sukham. And then we saw the whole table. So these are such kind of Sukhas which cannot be mentioned as Sukhas, but something as very, very, very transcendent. So the Saptalokas are so described. You get this in details in some of the Puranas, particularly Srimad Vishnu Puranam. More detailed description of all these planes are mentioned. We get to mention some kind of tourist in the tourist guides, a location, flora, fauna, places worth visiting, where to live, how to reach, etc., etc. So such informations are available about these celestial planes, and Puranas mention it. The point is, most important point is that all these are within human embodiment. Yogis explore them within. Unlike you see in some of the observatories, astronomical observatories, they have their telescopes and radio telescopes and Hubble telescopes through which they are looking into the space around us, and they explore and they try to describe. So all the time they will be having attachment of telescopes of various magnitudes to look into the universe and tell us about something which is some tens of light years away, some hundreds of light years away, something thousands of light years away, millions of light years away, and billions of light years away. And they describe us. Whereas the human embodiment is microcosm. This is an important point to be noted as students of yoga. And yogi would be citing them all this by Surya Samyama, which you heard, Surya Dwara Samyama, Surya Nadi Samyama, Sushumna Samyama. So he doesn't need telescope to look out in the universe. He explores all those by looking in. And that's why yoga is said to be inward journey, an inward journey of infinitude. The whole universe is explored, and that is how our rishis explore the universe within themselves, because there is microcosm. And therefore they are attainable for knowledge sake by samadhi dwara. And we just now came across reference to vitarkanugata, vicharanugata, asmitanugata, anandanugata. But then yogis can go even beyond the Brahmanda, which you just now heard. Ete saptaloka sarvesa brahmakaha videhe prakritilayastu mokshanam vartante iti na lokamadhe nyastaha. Asampragnata samadhi is the next samadhi after sampragnat, 4 categories. And that goes beyond the Brahmandam. So there are planes beyond the Brahmanda. beyond the universe. And asamprajñāt samadhi yogis are able to experience those what we call as delights, because everything in celestial plane is delight for us. So if we call them as delights, you can imagine what must be the grade of delights which would come to videha, prakritilaya, asamprajñāt samadhi and upaya pratyay asamprajñāt samadhi. The point is, the observatories for these universal planes are within. They are explored, discovered within, experienced within. That's what Vyasa finally says, that one should relentlessly go in pursuit of the knowledge of the entire universe without getting impeded, obstructed. So it would be a fascinating exploration. It will take you to the plane of asamprajñānaṃ samadhi, which is nishprapanchīkarana, beyond the Brahmandam. It takes the yogi beyond the Brahmanda, beyond the universe. But still we are not able to imagine something beyond universe. We are stuck in multiple universes, universe after universe. But back to the matter, esoteric geography says, while mapping the universe, there is something beyond that as well. So we are told about these various beings on different planes, and most importantly, not to treat them as aliens. They are gods, and therefore we worship them. They are worship worthy. Deva Nikaya. They are to be worshipped. They are glorious. And it becomes meaningless to position ourselves as treating them as aliens. They are superhuman powers. There is no point in pitting ourselves against them, treating them as aliens. The modern world generation should learn a lesson from this, and not to name them, label them as aliens. They are beings of other planes. How these beings are of higher planes are described in this exoteric geometry of whole universe. Okay.
Yes. So, since the multiple universes and the Vishnu Purana was mentioned, so in the Vishnu Purana it is said, Andanam tu sahasranam, sahasrani yutani cha, idrushanam tata tatra, koti koti shatani cha. So this Andam, which is the creation, the universe, it says that there are thousands such Andas, thousands such universes, and there are thousands such clusters. And all these clusters, there are crores and crores and hundreds of crores and crores of groups. So that is the scope of creation in the multiple, in the sort of line of thought of multiple universes. So Vishnu Puranam has clearly mentioned the sort of the enormity of the whole thing. Secondly, towards the end, Vyasa has said that elsewhere also saṃyama is to be done until all of this is seen. So another text nicely elaborates. It says, "Na kevalam suryadvara saṃyamasya eva bhuvanajñānaṃ phalam, kintu yoga shastrokta saṃyamantarasya api ityato ragakshayartham anyatra saṃyamena api samagra bhuvanam sakshatkaraniyam iti upadishati." So not only the Suryadvara, but there are various places for dhyana and saṃyama mentioned in the various texts of Yoga Shastra. So there is this various region, marmasthanani, ashtadasha marmasthanani, then there are chakras and the various esoteric areas within the embodiment that Yoga Shastra describes. And this line clearly says that all of these are relevant for the Sakshatkara being mentioned here. Guruji also makes that point. because when describing this sutra, he talks about the 14 worlds and 14 divisions of the universe, Bhuloka, Bhuvanloka, Suvarloka, etc. And then he says, just like we heard today, as the microcosm represents the macrocosm, the man's body epitomizes the entire structure of the great universe. So the 14 worlds are represented in the various regions of the body, from the crown of the head to the soles of the feet. And then he goes into detail. He says, taking the bottom portion of the torso as the central point, the aerial regions are situated above and the nether regions are below it. And then the different aerial regions like pelvic region is Bhuloka, navel region corresponds to the Bhuvarloka, diaphragmatic to the Suvarloka, etc. And similarly hips to the Atala, thighs to the Vitala. So the various nether regions are also mentioned. So the yogis, there is this notion of dhyana, and so taking the chitta in that region and having this conception of the shastras in the mind, bringing about the dhyana in those various regions, which then leads to the fruition, the specific fruit, siddhi, phala described in these texts. So similarly, then Guruji continues by saying that the aerial regions have the 7 major chakras, Mooladhara, Swadhisthana, Manipuraka chakra, etc., etc. And then the light that shines from the seat of the soul is the sun of life. It passes through the Surya Nadi and the gates of the Surya Chakra, he says, and illumines the 7 states of awareness in the yogi's consciousness, which also we had seen in the 2nd chapter, the Saptada Pranta Bhumi. So then Guruji summarizes by saying Patanjali speaks not only of external but of internal achievements. He instructs the aspirant to direct his mind towards the inner body to study and gain knowledge of the soul. So essentially, this sutra and the bhashya cover several sort of esoteric things, and as we learn about it, we have to ponder over these things. And then if our study takes us further into Puranas, etc., it helps us to make better sense of those Puranas, some of the concepts, some of the stories, but also at the same time taking the yogic approach of citing things within those things that are holy and mentioned to be significant without, that is externally as well. So we'll stop here for today. Recite the shlokas on Guruji and end for today. Vaijñānikam pravaktratve आसनेषु कलाविदं योगाभ्यासे च तत्त्वज्ञं वन्देऽहं सुन्दरं गुरुं योगवृक्षो हि लोकेऽस्मिन् यत्प्रेरणेन वर्धितः योगाचार्य गुरो तुभ्यं सुन्दराय नमो नमः. Thank you.
Namaskar all of you.